Good evening, Facebook. My name is Chuck Fagan, and this is a special presentation of the Better Savannah Facebook page. Better Savannah is Chatham County area's leading independent expenditure committee focused on progressive public policy outcomes here at the state and local level. Tonight, we'll be joined by former Tybee Island Mayor Jason Buelterman, who is running for the Chatham County Commission Chairman on the Republican ticket in 2020. This is our last presentation of candidates before the June 9th primary. I do want to let our viewers know that we are going to plan to go live on election night with a little bit of election coverage, hopefully between the 8 and 10 p.m. hours. So we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. With that being said, we're going to broadcast for 90 minutes this evening, go through a bunch of questions with this candidate. But first, I want to give him the opportunity to introduce himself. Former Mayor Jason Buelterman, please introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, Chuck and John, thanks for doing this and for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate it. I am a father of 3 girls, been married for 22 years, excuse me, my wife Jody, and I have been an educator in the public school system since I moved to Savannah over 20 years ago. And I run a program called International Baccalaureate at Johnson High School. I love my job, love working with those kids. And of course, I was mayor of Tybee for 14 years and made the decision not to run for re-election because I wanted to run for the county commission chairman seat, not out of any criticism of the current occupant of that job, Al Scott, but because I think that I have something a little bit different to bring to the table, to bring the community together in a more collaborative way.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. I want to ask you the first question. The recent city elections were historic as voters basically did not return any incumbents. You are jumping from one of the smaller municipalities in Chatham County to the entire county's electorate. What's your takeaway from that recent city elections? What do you think that means for 2020 and in your race?
I think that race energized a lot of people. You see more candidates than have run in the past for commission seats at the district level. I was on a forum earlier this morning with another organization, and it's clear that there are some very highly qualified candidates who are in it for the right reasons. So I think that's a good thing. So I think that just had the effect of energizing people and encouraging them to run and making them think that they could make a difference and that they could win.
Thank you for that response. Jason, the county chairman and the mayor of Savannah are limited to 2 terms. Almost every council candidate last year campaigned on bringing about term limits for all of the city council aldermen. And as we have interviewed some 14 district level candidates for county commission district seats, people you will be working with if you win the November elections, have pledged some form of term limits, whether it's 2 or 3 terms for all of the district level county commissioners. Do you see this as good policy? Will you work to change the charter of the Chatham County to bring about term limits for all commissioners?
I mean, if that's the direction that a majority of the commission members and new commission members would want to go in, that's something that I would certainly take a look at. There's some other things too that I think would be beneficial that could be considered. One of them is staggered terms. I know a lot of places do that, and what it does is it has the effect of not having. Well, basically, what it means is you would have only half of the district seats and the commission chairman seat up every 4 years, and then the other half would be up every 4 years. So you don't have the potential to have a complete and total turnover. Not that what happened in Savannah is necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's good to maintain some institutional knowledge, and having 4-year staggered terms I think can be very, very helpful and beneficial. And there's been a lot of talk about term limits, but I think that's something else we could talk about. And I also don't understand why the coroner and some other of these seats are partisan. Is there a Democrat or Republican way to be a coroner or to take on a lot of these seats, even the commission seats? I mean, I think that's something that could be up for discussion. And, I'd be willing to look into that possibility.
Thank you. I think that's a compromise, the staggered terms. That's a compromise that's come about from this discussion. I think we see that as definitely a fair compromise in the debate to limit some of that turnover that you mentioned. I'm going to pass it over to John McMasters, who's got a few questions about poverty and growth.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck. Jason, prior to the Corona-19 virus, Chatham County over the past decade, actually last 2 decades, has experienced really significant growth and business expansion. We're talking about the ports, the container numbers there, the Savannah College of Art and Design, the tourism industry. Despite that growth, Chatham County's poverty rate is 17.3%, while nationally, county poverty rates average around 13%. After all that wealth creation and expansion, can you talk to us about why Chatham County has not seen a decrease in its poverty rate?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't think there's a right answer to this necessarily. I know that if you go to Effingham County's poverty rate is below 10%. Fulton, 16%. Muskogee County, Columbus, Georgia is up at like 24%. Macon-Bibb, a consolidated government, is 27%. So there are some other communities that share this problem. I think we are small enough that we can really come together to really move the needle on that. I had mentioned at another one of these that I did that the poverty rate was 14.5%. That was incorrect. The poverty rate's actually higher at 17.3. So it is significantly higher than the national average. I don't know why, but I think we can move the needle. I've been involved with some of these forums where I hear people say that perhaps we can get it down to next to nothing. That's not possible, but we can move the needle on issues like affordable housing and some other initiatives that we could take to potentially reduce that. If you look at things like Deep Speaks, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that program, but that's an incredible youth development program. And those kids, regardless of where they come from and what economic conditions they come from, are going to be on a glide path to not be one of those 17.3% going forward. If you look at things like Gulfstream Student Leadership Program, that's another example. Look at the Youth Commission. I think there are opportunities to really target the kids at the middle school and high school level that look like they might be on track to not have a lot of success economically, and utilize all the resources that we have here to target those kids, to try to get them into more programs like Deep, like Gulfstream, like all these other Front Porch, all these things that are going on, expand those programs or build new ones so that we can move the needle a little bit more going forward. It's not going to happen immediately. And, but we can move it a little bit. And I would like to set a measurable goal to say, after 4 years, which should be tough given what is going on with COVID and the economic impacts of that, but reduce it by 1 or 1.5% and update the public on where we are with that every single year and what kind of progress we're making. That was a long answer to a short question, but.
Well, you're a teacher, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to digress for a quick second here, but this poverty question, far too often, in my opinion, people point the finger at the school system, and it goes to wages, and they say, well, we can't attract higher wages because we don't have an educated workforce. That's not a question to you. That's just a comment from me. I think it's an unfair observation on a lot of people, or incomplete observation on a lot of people's part, because teachers can't do it in and of themselves. You've got 2/3 of the Chatham County school system, kids are living in poverty. It's hard to keep up, and it's hard to parent in that dynamic. Anyway, thanks for that. Here's the next question. In the last 40 years, growth has taken on a mostly positive connotation. Yet many urban planners, economists, sociologists are changing their definition and understanding of growth. Today, experts are cautioning that growth can be an impediment to the quality of life and cause residents to actually pay higher property taxes. What is your view on growth in Chatham County, and what best practices should Chatham County adopt as a future guide for growth? And I'm going to pause and interject that short-term vacation rental dynamic that Tybee has grappled with over the last 3 or 4 years. It seems like to me, Jason, you can probably correct me on that, but you got a lot of locals that aren't very happy with what happened with STRVs, and a lot of them said, "Why didn't you regulate it sooner?" So that's a compound question. I apologize, but give us your great answer.
Well, let's start with the first part of that question,
Yeah.
which is basically my view of growth and what policies can we take to deal with it going forward, because we are anticipating growth, especially on the west side. You know, if you look at the history of Chatham County, it was very well planned initially when you look at Oglethorpe's plan in downtown, and that's why one of the reasons we have the STVR problem downtown is because they did such a great job making it walkable, making it a place with tree canopies. You know, it's just a beautiful part of our country, and we should be proud of what we have and what we've maintained. But if you look at other parts of the county where we've seen growth, you know, you have those parts oftentimes look like Anytown, USA, you know, where there's not many sidewalks, where there is evidence that perhaps there wasn't a whole lot of master planning that was done. So, you know, when I go to Atlanta, we all have to drive up I-16 and 75 to go to Atlanta from time to time. And the first thing I think of when I think of Atlanta is traffic. And, you know, we don't want, in particular, the west side of the county to be known for that, which I think is sort of happening. So I think we need to be more proactive in terms of transportation planning. The chairman of the county commission sits at the head of the core MPO, as you guys know, and they make key transportation funding decisions for the county in terms of where federal and state dollars are directed. I think there can be, we can do better in that respect in terms of being more proactive and less reactive. I love things like the Tide to Town plan that has been developed, having been to other places that have aggressively tried to connect communities with multi-purpose paths and things like that. If they can do it in Atlanta, Lord knows we can do it down here. So there's things like that when new communities are planned and developed, those types of things ought to be taken into consideration. You should be able to, if you live downtown, you can get out, so you can go outside, you can take a walk, you can go to a park, you can go to a store, you can go get your groceries without ever getting in your car. And that's not true in a large part of the county. It's true on Tybee. I'm blessed to live in a place like that, and people do that all the time. We have a bike path right past my house. So I would like to see us plan a little bit better through the MPO. So when as new development pops up, we take trees, bike paths,
sure. Transportation,
sidewalks, infrastructure, all those things into account, and just instead of just letting things go through and get approved without thinking about those issues.
Great, thank you for that. Just quickly on the, I'm curious on the short-term rental thing at Tybee. How did that get away from your council?
So Tybee has really always had those types of issues. They have been exacerbated recently with the development of VRBO and companies that do this type of thing, and that's how they make their bread and butter, Airbnb, et cetera. But Tybee's always been a place where people have their homes out here and they rent them out. But, you know, we have talked about regulating that more severely while I was mayor, and there was an incredible amount of blowback because there's also a lot of people who live here, own a lot of those second homes, or have an interest in it at some point, selling their house or using it for that purpose. I think that we could have done a better job to manage that, for sure. But one thing I will say is that, you know, I don't think it's right for the state to step in and say, you're not allowed to develop any local regulations to regulate STVRs. And I've heard a lot of talk about that at the state level. So what we did on Tybee is we just charged a lot more. We increased enforcement significantly, but we didn't take that next step of minimizing the number that you can have. And I would imagine that at some point, Tybee's going to get there, like Savannah did, like Austin, Texas did, and other places. But there was a lot of blowback on that when it was brought up while I was mayor.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot,
Thank you,
Jason. I'm going to give it back to Chuck. He's got a couple ethics procedural questions.
Thanks, John. Mayor Jason, the Savannah City Council is currently updating their ethics ordinance to possibly include disclosure of any campaign contributions over $250 received from any person or entity that is doing business or has done business with the city of Savannah in the prior 12 months. Would you start updating the county's ethics ordinance in a similar fashion?
I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. Full disclosure, full transparency is always the best way to go. We did that on Tybee. The ACCG is the Association of County Governments, as you know all about them, John, and the city has its equivalent in the GMA, Georgia Municipal Association, and the GMA has some really good programs for kind of model programs for setting up better ethics ordinances and things for their municipalities. ACCG, I'm sure, has the same types of things. But the short answer to your question is yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I want to ask you a couple of follow-up questions in this arena. If you go to the Chatham County Elections Board website and you look to pull campaign finance disclosures, I think the first thing you'll notice is that a lot of candidates just simply don't file them, as is required by the law. And for the ones that do, the online system that is there is extremely antiquated. It feels like an HTML website straight out of 2003, and it's not very user-friendly. Can you see investing, we're talking probably, pennies on the dollar in the budget to be able to upgrade some of those systems and things to be able to provide some more transparency to the public?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a frustrating situation where I submitted all my stuff on time, but I go onto that website and I see a lot of candidates didn't submit anything. But that doesn't mean that they didn't submit it, because I submitted one that was due April 30th and it's still not on their website. And I'm thinking, well, I can't criticize others, not that I would publicly, but I am curious to see where people are getting their money from, and I can't see it because either A, they didn't submit it, or B, it has not been posted to the website. And that's not that difficult of a task to take those forms and get them quickly, immediately on the website. I think in the past, you literally had to go there, right, and look at it or make a copy of it. Like you said, this is not the Stone Ages. There's a way to do it and provide more transparency. So it's a frustration for me, and it's something that I would definitely address.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. The Chatham County Ethics Board has 3 members. Do you know who they are or what they do? Do you think that should be a more active board?
So I got this questionnaire this morning and looked it up, couldn't find it. So the answer to your first question is no, I don't know who they are. And which I can only assume means there's not a lot of activity in that group, but I could be wrong. I just don't know a whole lot about it.
I think there's 3 members. Go ahead, John.
Well, I just wanted to answer Jason's observation. The Chatham County Ethics Ordinance has not been revised or updated since 2005. And at that time, the Ethics Board would be comprised it would be activated once an ethics complaint was filed with the clerk of the commission. And then the chairman would appoint one person. The balance of the commission would appoint one person. And those 2 people would in turn appoint a third person who had to be a practicing attorney. And those 3 people would hear the issue and decide the issue. So it was hard for me to find it. I would think stuff like that should be a lot more accessible. I agree with you, but that's the answer. Thanks, Chuck.
Perfect. Let's move on to some SPLOST questions. The SPLOST is the special purpose local option sales tax. It is a county tax, regardless of where projects may be lying in any given municipality or at the county level. So the first question in this category, Jason, is back in SPLOST 4, voters approved tens of millions of dollars for a new courthouse to replace the Montgomery Street Judicial Complex. The project was never undertaken. Instead, the SPLOST money was used to buy and refurbish a couple of buildings nearby, think the Lacaucus building, for example, but was never used to build a new courthouse. Now, 15 years later, the county has asked the city, and the city agreed to issue $80 million in bonds to build the new courthouse, and those bonds would be repaid from SPLOST 7, which does not start being collected until the fourth quarter of this year. Why couldn't the county deliver to the voters the original courthouse 15 years ago? What will you do as chairman to restore confidence in SPLOST project delivery?
That's a great question. You know, one of the concerns that I have about local governments is that they have become extremely dependent upon SPLOST for their capital budget. And if SPLOST were to go away, like it did in Glenn County when the voters didn't approve it a couple years ago, the capital budgets of county and municipal governments is basically wiped out, at least for big projects. So it's incumbent upon the elected officials to make sure that they're doing a very good job of two things. Number one, informing the public about what's going on with SPLOST. And number two, following up and delivering the project that they said they were going to deliver when a referendum was passed. So I can't answer your question as to why it wasn't done. I was very focused on my issues out at Tybee. And I can tell you that when we received allotments of money to complete projects, I made very sure that before the next SPLOST referendum was up, you know, those projects were started. As an example, we had a old dilapidated police department that needed to go. I mean, they literally filmed like old movies where they wanted to make an old jailhouse look. They'd film it at Tybee because that place was in bad shape. So we replaced it with a SPLOST funded a project. It came in on time, under budget. We stayed completely on top of it. And we made sure we informed the voters at every step along the way of the process, what was going on, how much it was expected to cost, had a $3.5 million budget, and we stuck to it. So I think a similar thing can be done with this. I know that the county, you know, people criticize the county for one thing or another. One thing they've done a very good job of, in my opinion, is working on getting that AAA bond rating so that when and if they do, well, they will, you know, use bond funding to pay for the courthouse and then repay it with SPLOST funds. The interest that they're going to pay on that is minimal. So I can't answer your question as to why it hasn't happened, but I can tell you that I think we need to be fully transparent and deliver on what we say we're going to do before the next SPLOST referendum's up.
Let me ask you a quick follow-up question, and then I'll pass it back to John for a few more SPLOST questions here. One of your potential opponents in a debate we held maybe 2 weeks ago now, a week ago, Commissioner Jay Jones mentioned that he would support and author an ordinance that would require a time clock for all county level SPLOST projects. And this time clock would be based on feedback from the staff at the time of the project list. And if that time clock ran out prior to a start of that project, then the commission would be required to vote on its feasibility. Would you support some type of ordinance like that?
What would happen? What was his proposal?
It was kind of like it was a proposed time clock for each major SPLOST project, saying that, you know, if we're expected to start the project by X date and we fail to start it, then the county commission would have to reconvene and vote on that project's feasibility.
So if the time clock ran out, they'd have to vote on the feasibility of the project?
Correct.
What would that do?
I think it would at least bring it back to the voters in a public manner at the commission and make the commission, and more importantly, the staff, explain why that project did not meet its proposed time clock at the time the voters voted on it in SPLOST. Yeah,
I mean, I would support anything that would bring a higher level of transparency and accountability to SPLOST. I think that needs to happen. We made sure we did that, and I think that needs to happen at the county level, because what will happen is if there's an erosion of public confidence in the SPLOST and the SPLOST is not approved, And I know there's a lot of people that don't like it regardless because it's a tax, and I understand that. But 40% roughly of the revenue comes from out-of-towners. We're a tourist-driven economy. It makes sense to do that instead of taking it from property tax dollars. So if there's an erosion of trust and there's a chance that that goes away, then all of a sudden you're looking at some very difficult decisions in terms of capital projects. You know, the nice bells and whistles, the football stadiums and stuff are great. But there's also bread and butter things that go away for drainage and infrastructure and other things. And that would be a real problem for Chatham County and the municipalities, especially Savannah.
Okay.
John, go ahead.
I've got a question for you, Jason. We both know that there is no most municipal option sales tax. There's only a SPLOST county tax, and it's through the intergovernmental agreements that money flows from the county to the municipalities from the SPLOST collections. There's a contentious, long overdue project in Savannah. It's the new arena out on the west side. No one argues that the west side of Savannah has been neglected and abused economically for 15 or 20 years. But it's taken so long to do the project, and the costs have mushroomed from 80 million to 165 million. The county controls all SPLOST referendum and referendum language. If City Council, Jason, if you were chairman of the commission and City Council sent you a resolution or request to organize an election to ask the voters if they want to repurpose the remaining money in the arena accounts, would you oblige and accommodate the City Council in their request to do that?
Would that be a referendum that would take place for the citizens of Savannah, since it's a Savannah?
It would have to be a
Countywide tax.
Yeah, I know it's a countywide tax, but that's a project that comes out of the funding that Savannah is allocated out of the SPLOST. That's not one of those countywide.
All voters, sorry to interrupt you, Jason, but all voters voted on the original SPLOST, which included those projects, whether they were City of Savannah voters or not. So it would still, to our knowledge of the law, we could be mistaken, but we do believe it's a countywide referendum. The Pipe Makers Canal is a good example of that, maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's something, if the City of Savannah said they wanted to do that, I would certainly look at that. And the reason I'm running is because I think we need to increase collaboration. And I think we've seen a little bit of a breakdown in that recently. So I would be more than willing to talk to them about it, but I would certainly want to talk to, John or the attorney,
John,
and just to see whether or not that would be something that would be legal and feasible. But yeah, I'd certainly welcome that discussion. What it's also important to understand, though, that the voters have been promised an arena for at least 2 SPLOSTs. So that's the flip side of this coin, is that people have been saying, hey, you told us you're going to build an arena. You told us you're going to build an arena. Where's the arena? So that's another thing to consider. I know there's a lot of.
Yeah, John, I think that's a great point. And I want to ask you a follow-up right here, because I think pre-COVID, we would have been much more apt to agree with that position. But given what you know now about how this virus is likely to change American life, do you think arenas will even be relevant? I mean, I think that's where the question is coming from, is that in this crisis, I think we both know that arenas, are you ready to go to a Georgia game, tomorrow? I don't think the answer to that is yes.
No, of course not. But we're all at least I am very optimistic that in the next 12 to 18 months, there'll be a successful vaccine developed, and hopefully we can all go back to normal. I don't think this is the new normal that's going to last forever. At least I hope it's not. I haven't seen my dad since this thing started, and this needs to end. So to answer your question, Chuck, I don't think we should adjust based on, these projects based on the fact that currently we can't all get together in groups of thousands of people, but I'm confident that we will in the next 12 to 18 to 24 months.
Fair enough. John, you want to answer the next question?
I have one more SPLOST question, and then we'll stop beating you over the head about SPLOST. But Jason, you know full well that when you do a major SPLOST project, there like the arena or like a stadium or any capital project, there is ongoing maintenance and operation of costs associated with that project that cannot be paid from SPLOST funds. It has to be paid out of the M&O budget or the general fund, if you will. So would you support an initiative to better educate voters on what staff's projection may be for the ongoing maintenance and operation costs of a major capital project? I think that would be very useful and helpful for a voter to make a decision, because that M&O is mostly funded out of property tax, and that's going to come back into their wheelhouse sooner or later. So this could be done on a website. It could be done on a mailer. I don't know if it could be done on the ballot. It'd probably make the ballot far too long. But what do you think of that idea for transparency?
I think it's great. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think that's one of the, I support SPLOST, but I think that's one of the problems with it is that voters aren't always made aware of the ongoing M&O costs. Now, of course, there's some projects, drainage projects, that reduce, ongoing costs. There's other projects where I think we could plan them in such a way. For example, when a new county building is constructed to replace another one, I think you can design it in such a way that you make it more energy efficient than the previous building and actually reduce M&O costs. I mean, solar panels right now, it used to be that you had to have government subsidies to make them feasible and economically wise to invest in that. But anymore, it's starting to look like the payback on those types of investments comes back much quicker. We did a geothermal thing out at Tybee, and it's been fantastic. It's saving us a ton of money. So the answer to your question is yes. I think we should be more open with the public about ongoing M&O costs. I see in your question the thing about the aquatic center. That's a very good point. That's lots of ongoing M&O costs. But I also think we should work really hard to invest in the projects wisely up front so that we can reduce the M&O costs by making them more energy efficient.
Right. Thanks. Those are good answers, Jason. Really appreciate that. Chuck?
Mayor Buelterman, almost immediately when we announced that we would be interviewing you, we received an immense amount of feedback from City of Savannah voters to be sure and ask you about Orange Crush. Now, for some background, from my research and talking to community leaders, Orange Crush has been happening in some form or fashion since at least the late 1980s. And for those who are not familiar with the event, it is generally a spring break event held largely for Black college students. During your time as mayor, your council made various policy decisions in order to dissuade those events from happening. So why don't you address Orange Crush as a whole? Give me your feel about how that went down and what your council decided to do in response, and I'll have a few follow-up questions for you.
Sure. Well, just a couple things. One thing that we tried to do while I was mayor is make sure that the young people who came to Tybee for Orange Crush were safe. It had been an event that has had a history of young people getting hurt. One individual was killed a long time ago. While I was mayor, we had a shooting where somebody was shot. Thankfully, they were okay. It wasn't anything life-threatening. But when I think about if it was my kid coming to Tybee or going anywhere or going on a spring break, I would hope that the officials in that town would take steps to make sure that my kid's going to be safe. I teach a lot of the kids that come out to Orange Crush. I see them out there. So it's not just college kids. It's a lot of high school age kids too. I know because I see them every year. I go out and greet kids and, talk to them and interact with them and make sure that our police are doing what they're supposed to be doing. But I don't take any, I wouldn't change anything about how we police it. We reach out to other organizations, Savannah State University, Savannah Police, County Police, Garden City Police, Georgia Southern Police, to come out, and generally they are very much willing to support us, generally at no cost. So when a lot of folks see Orange Crush on Tybee, they see a much heavier hand of a police presence. But when I interact with kids, I don't see any issues between police and these kids. They're generally just having a good time. 99.9% of them are well behaved. It's the 0.1% knuckleheads. I used to go on spring break. I did stupid things when I was on spring break. It's just a function of being young. So I don't take any, I don't apologize at all for having extra police. I think that's a good thing. I think we should protect these kids as best we can. Secondly, my council did decide to ban the consumption of alcohol. Tybee's a place, like a few other places in the country, Key West, New Orleans, Savannah, where you can drink outside publicly, alcohol. And so it was restricted just on the weekends when Orange Crush was anticipated. And I spoke out aggressively against that because I felt like that would lead to the perception that a race was being targeted. I don't think my council members in any way were doing that, but that's what a lot of people perceived. So after that happened, we brought in a federal mediator to bring different sides of the issue together to come up with a better solution going forward. And what they developed, and so this was council members who wanted to continue that policy of only targeting that one event, and people in our community. A lot of them were in we have an MLK parade out here. We've done it for years. Julia Pierce, if you know her, does it. She does a great job with it. And she has an organization. It was folks from her organization sitting down at the table to talk with those who wanted to be more restrictive towards Orange Crush. And they came up with a policy going forward that all high volume events like 4th of July, St. Patrick's Day, Orange Crush, the same policies would be enacted on all of those events. So while there was a lot of consternation from the public about those policies that were originally put in place, I think we figured out a way to address that going forward. But I did not support that when it was done, and I was pleased to see that mediator and those folks who sat down at the table were able to come up with a reasonable and equitable solution.
I appreciate that answer, Jason. I think we both know, and as a long-time Tybee Island resident, that Tybee has a history, going back many decades. Former Mayor Edna Jackson famously arrested on that beach. And so I think that given the historical implications of the public access to that beach, I do agree that the perception became the reality. But I want to ask you a follow-up question about how it reflects on your leadership. You mentioned that you spoke out aggressively. And I don't live in Tybee Island. I've only followed it as a city of Savannah voter. But it seems to me, in the style of former President LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, that you could have twisted some elbows to kill that resolution from your council. Do you think that the opposition on your council was just too strong, or did you miss an opportunity of leadership to really show the residents of this county that you could do what's not popular when it's right?
Well, if you were to watch the meeting where that was decided, I put my back into that one more than I do on most other issues. And usually I was able to use that bully pulpit to get things done that I wanted to get done. But ultimately, I lost that battle, but I tried very, very hard. But I was not going to come out of it afterwards and after they did something I disagreed with and try not to figure out a way to make it better going forward. So I think that what we did going forward made sense and resolve the issue of the perception that what was being done was targeted one particular group. But to answer your question, I tried very, very hard. Now, the mayor position in our charter, I only got to vote when it was a tie, and I tried very hard to get a third person to go along with me on that, but I was unable to do that. The chairman seat is a much different situation. The chairman has veto power, sets the agenda, and has a whole lot more power and authority than does my role as mayor. And I'll say something else too. I reached out to the head of the NAACP on multiple occasions, who happens to be the chairman, to try to help with this. I had multiple meetings with Edna.
Yeah.
In fact, Edna, one of the things I did with Edna was when we tore down our old police station, because she was involved in the wait-in and she was actually arrested. Right. And I had some blowback from some people saying, well, that didn't really happen. Well, I had them pull up the records. It turns out she was arrested. There's documentation of that. And we got a brick from the facility that was knocked down to make the new police station. We had it engraved. We did a special presentation for her at our council meeting to apologize for what Tybee had done in the past. So my point is that I really tried to reach out to the African-American leadership community. Edna was very much willing to help, but I did not get the support I would have liked, frankly, from others.
I appreciate that candid response. I think given that you are running in a majority-minority county like Chatham County in a county-wide fashion, I don't expect that you won't stop answering questions about this for some time. So I really do appreciate your candid responses to those questions.
Well, I appreciate you asking. I look forward to talking about it.
Absolutely. John, you want to take us a little bit more about public safety now?
Sure. Jason, the Chatham County Police Department has approximately 110, 115 officers, and the unincorporated population is roughly 92,000 people. That's a ratio of 1.3 officers per 1,000. And according to national data and discussion on the topic, that's a very low ratio for a suburban service area. And I think we can agree that unincorporated Chatham County is suburban and not rural. Do you see a need to slightly increase that ratio to the standard of 1.5? It might mean hiring 15 to 20 more officers. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely would like to have more officers on the county police force. Now how you do that, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Especially, if you had asked me that 4 months ago, I think I could say, oh yeah, we can come up with the plan to figure out a way to over 3 or 4 years to make that happen. But there is going to be an increased likelihood of decreased revenue. But I will say this, I think there's been a lot of discussion about how the county's going to go off the cliff financially, but the county is far less reliant upon sales tax than the cities, and the city of Tybee, city of Pooler, city of Savannah. And I don't think this is going to be an issue, a situation like 2008 was, where it was a real estate crash. I think the feds are doing a pretty good job of backstopping that and making sure people have the opportunity to get a forbearance, so you won't have, a complete collapse in housing prices. So the county should be able to weather this storm. They have about 30% in their fund balance. They're doing pretty good. I think Al's done a good job. Pete did a good job before him of building up their fund balance from when it was basically nothing, by the way, when Pete started. I won't say anything else about that. But go ahead.
I will. I was on the commission, and your opponent filled up shortfalls by tapping the reserves with the logic that was the people's money, and it wasn't fair to them to put it in reserve accounts. Enough said on that. I have another.
Well, I'll say this: is I have been encouraged to be more negative in my campaigning.
No, I just did it for you.
I know. But and I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go there. I've been encouraged to have ads run like that about that one issue, but I'm not going to go there. But my point is, though, is that even though there is clearly going to be a decrease in funding coming to the county, I don't think it's going to, and I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as what Savannah's going to face and the state government's going to face. It's very reliant upon sales tax dollars. So I think it is possible, even given this crisis, to slowly build up the county police force to get to the point where we want to get that ratio.
Terrific. I have one more public safety question for you. It'll be a quick one. As you probably have heard in this bifurcated session at the legislature, there are a couple of bills moving through the houses to end county police departments. And I think there's only 2 or 3 out of the 159 counties. And I guess we won't know if this passes or not, but what would you do, or how would you feel? Would you support the idea of getting rid of county police departments, or should they be retained?
I think it's fine the way it is.
Okay.
I will say that when the breakdown and the merger happened, that was an example to many people of the lack of collaboration, especially in my opinion on the county's end. That's just my own opinion.
No, I'm with you 100%. That was the problem.
But it seems to me, on the other hand, that most of the people who live in unincorporated Chatham County are more pleased with the police presence now than they were before. That being said, I think they could have worked out the merger to do both of those things, keep the department together while at the same time increasing presence and making it more fair for the county. But to answer your question, no, I don't support getting rid of county police departments.
Yeah, Jason, let me ask you this question. That's something that came up as a really big topic in our district attorney's primary debate that we held for the 2 ladies running for that nomination. The Chatham County Jail has been overfilled for many years. That's why we did a huge expansion of it. What do you believe is the correlation, if any, between crime statistics and poverty in this county, specifically in West Savannah, Port Wentworth, or Savannah, Port Wentworth, Garden City, these areas that have the higher crime statistics?
Direct. There's a direct correlation. And the more we can do to reduce poverty, that'll have an advantageous effect on crime rates. Bottom line. Look, let me. So I have I'm in an odd place. I think a really unique place in my life, in that I run in the circle of being the mayor of Tybee and go to the chamber events and go to Atlanta for the for the annual events and all that kind of Savannah Chatham Day, and go to all with CETA and all this stuff. And those people are great. That's one part of Savannah, and I run in that orbit. But I also, every day I go to work in another part of the orbit, right? And what I see, one of the things that I see we can do better is to bring those 2 orbits a little bit closer together. I think there, as I mentioned, there are a few initiatives that have gotten off the ground. The Summer 500 program that Eddie started, I think that's fantastic. I think we need more of that stuff. Gulfstreams program, fantastic. The more we can do that, and we're small enough as a county where I think we can make a big difference by working together. The more we can do of that, poverty will go down a little bit, crime will go down a little bit. I've had several kids that I've taught that have gotten shot and killed. Smart kids, good kids, dead before they hit 18. That is unacceptable. And we got to figure out a way to do everything we can to draw total attention to not just when something hits the front pages. You know, it's horrible what happened down in Glenn County. Horrible what happened to that kid. But it's also horrible what happened to all those kids that are getting shot and killed in Savannah. And we got to figure out a way to stop it. And I think we can. I don't think we can stop it completely, but we can do a lot to bring down that murder rate, that violent crime rate significantly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's change topics a little bit and talk a little bit about affordable housing. Mayor Buelterman, in 2019, the county budget, there was a line item for housing and development showing $1.2 million. However, after further research, this is the amount that the county gave towards MPC and SAGES. Don't you find that a little misleading for the county to label that housing development when it's more of an administrative cost?
Honestly, Chuck, when I saw this question today, I just don't know enough about that issue to give you an intelligent response.
Well, let me give you another question then. In SPLOST 7, last November, the city of Savannah included $10 million of its SPLOST share to go towards affordable housing, but the county included no such language. Given that a lot of the growth is going to be in the unincorporated Chatham County the next 10 years, do you find the need for the county to be participating in an affordable housing program? And what are your ideas of what to do there?
I love what the city of Savannah is trying to do. I think that the concept that they've come up with to utilize SPLOST money as a seed money to create a revolve, I think it's fantastic, and I hope it works. And I think if it works, it can be a model for what can happen countywide. But of course, there's not going to be another SPLOST referendum for 6 years, or maybe a little bit sooner. The referendum will come up. So in the interim, I think there's a lot that can be done to address affordable housing, which in the past, I think we all just assumed was a function of the federal government, and it needs to be more a function of local governments. And I think we can do it in such a way where we're not burdening the taxpayers. I don't want anybody to think that I want to raise taxes for that kind of thing, but I do think we can move the needle, not just on the poverty rate, but move the needle on affordable housing. I mean, the average housing costs, the poverty rate 17%, but housing costs are going up much faster than the rate of income for folks. So that's something that we have got to address. Look at what it's doing to places like San Francisco and other places. I mean, they're having huge problems. We do not need that to happen here. So the more we can do and work with the city of Savannah, the better. I've gone to a lot of meetings about affordable housing, and I hear a lot of talk, but the only real action I've seen so far is that SPLOST and some of the other plans that I've seen for developing certain tracts of property. But I think more can be done. I'm not saying it can be completely solved, but I think we can make a better effort collaboratively to deal with that affordable housing issue.
Great. Thank you, Jason. John, let's shift back to John. He's going to ask you a question or two about impact fees, and then I'll be back to ask you a question about CETA. John?
Thanks, Chuck. Just a preamble thought here. We've talked about affordable housing challenges that are very significant across the county. We've talked about poverty and its influence in crime and public safety. Jason, my view is we have a wage problem in our community. And do you have any thoughts or ideas on how do we get better wages for so many people that are working at subpar, low, non-living wage rates? How does that get fixed?
If I had the answer to that, I'd be a
You'd get elected.
Famous person, and I'd get elected. And there's no easy answer, but I think we can look at what has happened in other communities to make that situation much improved. And I also hear a lot of talk about joblessness and unemployment rates, and we need to create more jobs. We need to create more careers. It's not just a job. A job that pays $10 an hour isn't going to pay the rent. And we, because we're a tourist driven economy, a lot of money comes here through tourism, which is great. We have a lot of service sector employees that don't make a livable wage. But you look at what's happened in other communities that have developed, that have been incubators for business development. You look at what's happening. I think there's some good initiatives happening. What's happening at the new Groves High School with the work they're doing with Gulfstream, more of that. Some of this is more a function of the school system than it is of the county, but the county chairman is that one person that truly represents the entire county. Everybody in the county votes for the chairman, and the chairman can use the bully pulpit to bring people together to try to move the needle on some of these issues that you're talking about.
John, do you mind if I ask a follow-up question? Yeah, I'm sorry. Sure. Sorry to interrupt you, Jason. I think you're onto something here. One of the biggest problems is a state law called preemption, right? And so you are running in the same party as the current governor. Would you make the message? Would you send the message to the leadership in Atlanta that it's time to end preemption and allow municipalities to boost wages of those low-wage workers?
Are you talking about making it so that localities can implement livable or minimum wage on their own?
That's correct. That's correct.
I don't know. That's something I'd have to look at. That's a really good question. I know that the county has taken steps to make it so their own employees have a certain wage, but that wage does not really rise to the level of what the city of Savannah considers a livable wage, because they're paying their employees even more than Chatham County is. So I think you have to start with your own employees. But to answer your question, I can't give you a definitive answer. That's something I'd have to look into. I'm all for, Chuck, local control. I mean, it's one of the reasons I'm a conservative, is because I believe in more local control. The people at the ground level know more about their community than somebody. Certainly we have state representatives who represent us who live in our area, but the majority of them don't. They live in Atlanta. Same with Washington, D.C. So more local control, the better, generally, is my attitude.
Okay.
Thank you. John?
Okay. Let's talk about new revenue sources for the county, Jason, because even though you may be a little better positioned than the city since you're less reliant on sales tax, you're still going to have some holes to plug up. Since 1990, many counties have implemented impact fees on new construction. Would you support impact fees on new construction in unincorporated Chatham County?
That's a great question. We actually did that on Tybee. That was one of the initiatives that I led. It was at the time it was $1 a square foot. We called it aid to construction, and it would pay for water, sewer, basically the capital costs associated with that. And then we increased it by the rate of inflation, which is a whole different issue. But I think that with a lot of these fees that we have in place, they just sit there and they stay in place until a future commission decides 15 years later to increase them, and it's a big political hot button thing.
Sure.
Whereas if you just increase things gradually by the rate of inflation, that makes things a whole lot easier. But to answer your question, that is something I would look into. However, it's a little bit more complicated and unincorporated than it is, say, in Savannah and Tybee, because a lot of them are on privately owned water systems and infrastructure systems. So the aid to construction on Tybee was justified because we tied it directly to water and sewer. So that would be one that would make it a little bit more complex at the county level.
Well, I want to push back, John, because I think that, for every 1,000 homes that are built, that's a police station, that's a fire station that's going to need to get built, or I don't know the exact calculation, obviously, here. But I think water and sewer is perfectly fine in the cities. But I agree with you. But there are still other service delivery costs that are capital expenditures that will need to get spent in order to service new and growing areas. And I'm specifically thinking about Southwest Chatham and the Highway 17, Quaco Road 204 corridor, where there is a potential for some 5,000 to 10,000 homes to be built over the potential 2 terms you could serve. I think that's the service delivery demand is going to increase for capital projects, regardless of water and sewer. Could you address that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I would look into. I mean, we did it on Tybee, but it was specific for infrastructure. But you're right. But I'll tell you, too, there's definitely some infrastructure issues, even in unincorporated Chatham County, that's already built up. I mean, there's a lot of parts of the county where if there's a fire at your house, you don't have a fire hydrant to service that situation. We had one in unincorporated close to Tybee. Y'all have been at the Crab Shack, right? Chimney Creek, right? That's unincorporated Chatham County. Somebody's house, a friend of mine's house caught fire, right? They don't have access to fire hydrants over there. And what got the fire out? John, can you tell me, what do you think? How do you think that fire was put out?
I don't know.
It was pretty creative.
Probably the rain.
No. Mosquito, Tybee firefighters were out there. They did everything they could to fight it, but they had to go get water and they use a pumper and all that. And it was difficult. I went out and watched it happen. I had to leave a council meeting to go to see what was going on. Mosquito control guy, that pilot, one of them pilots, unbelievable, scooped up water out of the marsh, flew over the house and dropped multiple loads of water on that sucker.
Wow.
That's crazy that kind of stuff is happening. So, Chuck, that relates to your question, because there's not only a need for increased police, fire, etc. There's also a need for infrastructure related issues in parts of the county that are already developed, which if those things were put into place would ultimately increase ISO rating, and would potentially have a positive impact on people's insurance costs long term.
I just want to echo Chuck's appendage to that impact fee thing. Yeah, you build 3,000 or 4,000 houses. You also have a greater need or impact on the court system. You have a greater impact on parks and recreation. Your library demand, it goes up. So the city of Savannah likes to say that they already charge impact fees, but what they're really talking about is their sewer connection. And it's maybe 1/10, 1/15 of what other communities charge for impact fees. So it's a bit of a misnomer to say, well, we already have impact fees. They're tap-in fees, and they're only 10 or 15% of what other communities are getting.
Yeah, it's tough though, because you do the impact fee, right? But then you're having then you're hitting affordable housing. You know what I mean? So you resolve one issue and you're making another issue worse. So as you know, John, government's tough decisions. There's no simple solution to anything.
It is. Look, you'll enjoy this, Jason. Let's say you had an impact fee schedule in place, and you also had an affordable housing problem. And the new builder says, well, God, can I get some relief on this impact fee schedule? That creates perfect opportunity for two things. One is to say, well, let's look at how much local labor you're utilizing in your project. That's a community benefits concept. And I forgot the, Chuck, what's the other benefit of that?
I think the other main benefit would be if we had a nonprofit affordable housing fund at the county level, we could trade, donations for impact fees. I mean, certainly, Jason, I don't think we're looking to put impact fees on affordable housing construction, but the median sales price in our county is $265,000. That doesn't strike me as an affordable home.
Well, I remembered my point, and it's this: if somebody's building apartments and they want to create some at market or slightly sub-market units and agree to keep them, pegged at that level, you could adjust their impact fee schedule to accommodate that. So you can solve your affordable housing supply problem with a little bit of regulation. So,
I think one of the biggest things that can be done at the county level is the use of leverage on affordable housing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great.
Chuck, you want to
Let's move on. I appreciate it. Yeah, I do. I really appreciate your answers there, Jason. I want to talk about CEDA, which is the Savannah Economic Development Authority. You brought them up earlier. The county commission makes 1/3 of the appointments to that board. CEDA, as you know, is responsible to put deals together and attract new businesses to our county. These deals are very generous, including property tax abatements for the school board, the county, and the city. The loss of this revenue is done in exchange for new job creation, but Chatham County never requires an independent audit of the promised number of jobs, nor the actual salaries that are being paid. Will you be willing to amend the county ordinance that establishes the interagency powers between Chatham County and CEDA to require an annual independent audit of CEDA contracts for jobs and salaries created?
Well, like I said earlier, I think transparency is always a good thing, especially when you're talking about public dollars. But I just got this. I didn't look at it last night. I didn't look at my emails. I haven't looked at the ordinance you're referring to, so I don't want to commit to that. But in general, I think the more transparency with taxpayer dollars, the better. I'd have to look into it, is my answer. Sorry.
Well, let me see if you can commit. It's okay. I think that's an acceptable answer for a politician running for office. That they're willing to look into something, but they can't commit to it. Let me ask you a question that maybe you can commit to. CETA's board is appointed 1/3 by the city, 1/3 by the city of Savannah, right? 1/3 by the Chatham County Commission, and a third. The last third of its board is appointed by CETA itself. When CETA was started and chartered, it really was more of a Savannah economy. I think you and I would both agree that the 2020 is more of a Chatham County economy, a regional economy, especially with the logistics corridor coming online. Would you support through a delegation legislative change to change the charter of CETA so that the last third of board appointments could perhaps go to a rotating municipality inside Chatham County, like Tybee Island or Port Wentworth, Garden City, Pooler? Do you think that opening up that board to more accountability to elected leaders via appointments is a good idea?
Yeah, I think that's something that could be discussed. I mean, serving on these boards, a lot of people who are on those boards get criticized, but they're not getting paid. I mean, a lot of times it's maybe not for CETA, but a lot of these boards, it's hard to even fill them because you can't find people who are qualified and are also willing to do it. But to answer your question, I do think it makes sense for the West Side in particular to have some power as it relates to the appointment of people on Savannah Economic Development Authority. And even Tybee, as an example, the film, the growth ever since Ron Stevens did that film tax credit thing, it has blown up and it has affected Tybee. It's affected all of us. And that's something that sort of falls under the umbrella of CETA. And we have had when I was mayor, we had a lot of discussions with them. So I think it wouldn't hurt to include the non-Savannah municipalities in the appointment of representation on CETA. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to take away their ability. There's a lot of good people who take a lot of criticism, but there's a lot of really good people on that board who are in it. I think a lot of them for the right reasons. To take power away from them when they're volunteering for that job, basically. So a little bit of both. I'm hedging a little bit. I would say give some power to the municipalities somehow without reducing the ability of the board itself to deal with its membership.
I think that's another relatively honest answer from a politician, which we find to be a rarity these days. John, do you want to ask Mayor here about the Port of Savannah? I think you'll notice, Jason, we're kind of along the line of relationships with institutions within our county and state here. So, John.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Buelterman, the Port of Savannah accounts for an estimated $30 billion of economic impact to the state and our region. Yet, locally, they produce a good number of good-paying jobs. But the port does not help the county nor municipalities offset or compensate for the congestion the port causes, the wear and tear on the roads coming from the port, and of course the pollution generated from port activities. Would you be willing to negotiate through and with the delegation to ensure that there is some means to get some revenue sharing going for the county and municipalities coming out of that wildly, fantastically successful port?
I assume you're talking about container fees?
Well, that's correct.
It does not have to be container fees. It doesn't personally matter to me what you call it. It's just for every $10 that transits through the port to benefit the region, the comeback from the state is 75 cents. It's a lopsided relationship that I think needs to be adjusted a little bit in the same way that SCAD has as much property off the digest as it does. There's a point at which, when they took away the container fees in 1997, the concept, it was Eric Johnson and that group's mission to try to jumpstart port activity, make it more competitive. It did, it worked, but it worked so well, we're now going to double the size of the port. There should have been some sort of sunsetting in that provision to eliminate the port fees, to at least bring it back for a vote in 10 years. It never happened. And once you give these things away, it's so darn hard to get back to square one, even halfway back to square one. So do what you will with that one.
Well, first of all, it's not a county issue. I mean, it would have to be something that would be done at the state level. I would be curious, what does the ILA think about that, though? What do the longshoremen think about that? Would they be supportive of that, you think?
That's a great point. And I think we should address that right now, actually. You have 3 members of ILA that were elected to city council of Savannah last year who all ran, including this plank on their platform. I think the leadership of 1414 understands that everybody is going to have to sacrifice for the next decade of growth here in Savannah. And while I'm sure there is a contingent that would perhaps fight it, we're not asking for California Long Beach's $47 per container here. We're talking about a couple bucks per container. I don't think we're asking for a lot.
Can I add on to that, Jason? No one's asking that this revenue be taken away from their wages. There's immense profits beyond the lucrative nature of the jobs at 1414 ILA. This is a bigger business equation, and we're giving the port tremendous support and access and cooperation. Isn't it reasonable to get a little something back in a good relationship?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying completely. What I guess my point about ILA is that if that container business is very much of a competitive thing. I mean, I know the ports do everything they can to figure out a way to beat Long Beach, to attract business that ends up with some of those shipping containers going to Chicago. You know what I mean? So in other words, one of the reasons it's so successful is just by geographic proximity. We're further west as a port, so therefore we're closer to getting to places in the Midwest in terms of what it takes to get over land. My point is that it's kind of like the grocery industry. It's a small margin, profitability situation. And if you do anything that would make the Savannah ports less competitive, and that then has a spillover effect on wages and jobs in Savannah, then you're solving perhaps one problem, giving local governments more revenue to do things, but you're creating a problem that those governments are trying to solve. So, and I also frankly, this is something that would have to go through the state. And I frankly don't see that happening. I just don't see it happening. I mean, do you guys see that happening at the state level?
I think we're talking about leadership here, Jason. I think we're looking for a Chatham County chairman that is going to grab the bull by the horns a little bit. There's nothing stopping Chatham County from putting toll roads on county roads in and around that area. There is nothing to stop, because when I hear you say, we can't do anything to make it uncompetitive, my reaction is, well, how many Chatham County residents need to die by 16-wheeler accidents with the immense amount of increase of truck traffic? There are ramifications in both directions. So again, I think we're looking for balance. Nobody's asking for $45, $50 a container to make them uncompetitive. But by the numbers last year, with nearly 5 million containers, that would be $10 million at $2 a container. You could split half of that with the county and the main municipalities that are impacted, including Tybee, which gets erosion because of the ship traffic in the channel. I think there could be a very fair and equitable split. The alternative is raising property taxes to meet, demand for services over the course of a few years here that we're going to need. So, I mean, again, I know that there's no legal direct way for you to institute a container fee because we gave that port to the state 25 years ago. But again, I think we're looking for what, and there's another question about a lobbyist here in a minute that connects slightly. What are you willing to do with the state? Are you going to go and testify and tell them about how this impacts us?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. All right. So you brought it up briefly, the erosion of Tybee's shoreline. It took us years to prove that the cause of that erosion was the shipping channel, was the fact that sand, which would normally migrate from the north, and I've given this spiel, I don't know how many times, to the federal level, state level, gets stuck in a trench basically and doesn't naturally replenish Tybee. So therefore, when our sand erodes, there's no natural replenishment of it. So what I did and what we did is went to Atlanta and went to Washington and aggressively lobbied, persistently lobbied. I mean, we were on them all the time to mitigate the damage that was being done by the existence of the man-made shipping channel. So what we were able to do, for example, is just a few months ago, got a $14 million project that was funded entirely by Washington and Atlanta that not only built out our beach, but built up our dunes for the first time. We'd never done that before to deal with mitigating storm surge from increased frequency of hurricanes and things like that. So I think the answer, in my opinion, is to go and say, look what's happening in Garden City. Look what's happening with truck traffic and the impact that's having on public safety. All right. And let's figure out a way to mitigate that with state and federal dollars that shouldn't have to come from property taxpayers here. And you have to go fight for it. And you got to be aggressive and consistent and smart and never give up. And that's what we've done. We've done it successfully. And I think it could be done at the county level.
I will say I find it slightly contradictory that you're for local control on one hand for some issues, but aren't willing to grab the state's bull by the horns again, so to speak, and demand that we have local control over some of that revenue produced from that port, which is producing those damages. Because we endorsed and have interviewed Gary Monroe in the 8th District, which covers that area primarily, and he will be the first to tell you the quality of the roads in and around that area are the poorest in the county. So while you may have a stronger state rep or maybe a better relationship with the congressman out at Tybee, I don't think that's boding well for the residents of Garden City, Port Wentworth, and West Savannah. And I think those residents are looking for a chairman that is going to be willing to demand parity from these institutions. Like we said, a similar institution with too much of a free ride, in our opinion, would be SCAD. So we're just asking, will you ask? They can say no, right? And you can find other ways to incentivize them to get away from that no. But I mean, will you at least open that idea up as chairman?
What I would do is I would go and fight to deal with the negative impacts that increased traffic, et cetera, is having on the west side with the same level of energy and tenacity that I went after mitigation dollars for what was happening on Tybee. That I think is what needs to happen. You need to have a chairman who's going to fight for your community in Atlanta and in Washington. We did it at the very small level on Tybee with a lot of dollars and a very, very complex projects. I don't see why that can't be done without having the possible negative impact on jobs, wages, et cetera, that would come from trying to tack on container fees. So we mitigated Tybee by getting $5 million from the state. Well, the Georgia Ports Authority is a state authority. So whether it's coming from the ports or whether coming from the state, I don't care. We got our $5 million and we fixed the problem. So I think there's a way to do that without having you look at the cost of some of these interchanges up in Atlanta that are getting built, it's amazing. And we need that here. I mean, I dealt with that trying to get Highway 80 fixed for 14 years.
Yes. Yeah. You definitely have.
Yeah, but you fight. I just think there's a way to do it that doesn't create a possibility of making the Georgia Ports Authority less competitive than, or suffer from higher costs and people lose jobs. I don't want to risk that.
I'll just generally point out, Jason, I just generally point out that the legislature has been far more interested in tort reform, which damages people's rights to seek damages from these trucking companies when they're involved in accidents. They've been far more interested in things like that than they have been in non-port expansion infrastructure dollars. There's a formula called the Lmig Formula. You're probably familiar with what I'm talking about here, Lmig, which is supposed to compensate localities for infrastructure costs, road costs. That formula hasn't been updated in 30 years, at the state level. I think there's an opportunity there. I would argue that other state authorities like the World Congress Center in and around downtown Atlanta, provide impacts to that city that would, should be compensated from the state. I do agree there's multiple ways to slice a loaf of bread. I think our point is that nobody's even brought a knife to the table yet, to begin cutting it. So, I think we're looking for leadership on that specific issue. Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think we need. I mean, we need somebody who's going to be tenacious up in Atlanta and in Washington to bring more of the tax revenue that we generate down here back to our community to benefit our community. The perception is that it all goes to Atlanta. And that's not to knock our state reps and our state senators. I think they're doing a very good job. I think that they're doing the best they can, but there's more representatives population-wise in Atlanta. It's just the way it is. So you just have to have a smart, tenacious, persistent representation at the county level to bring things back to the county. We did it on Tybee, millions and millions of dollars. And it's the point where I got criticized. Oh my gosh, you're a fiscal conservative. You're bringing back all this money to Tybee. Why are you doing that? An example, Obama had a stimulus thing, right? Which 2009 Republicans were critical of, right? And I broke the tie to get a energy efficiency grant of like $400,000 to Tybee, and people said, "Why are you doing that? You're a conservative." I'm like, "Yeah, if we don't get that money to us, it's going to go to Ludowici or something. We need to bring it back for Tybee because now it's saving us money in our energy bills at our city hall, which makes sense. Why not do that? You got to have somebody that's going to fight for that stuff and not be afraid."
Well, I think that. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, John. Last question here, John.
What's that?
Last question. We're running out of time.
It's not a question. It's an observation, and I know we need to wrap it up. What I'm hearing Jason say is, by and large, we share the same goals. We want to get to the same endpoint. He thinks he's got some alternative ways to get there. He's entitled to that. He's going to run on that. If they don't work, then there are other ways, and maybe those will come into play. But I'm just gratified that he shares. He's not pushing back on the objective. We got a lot of agreement here on what needs to be done. Now, as you said, we're talking about how are we going to slice the bread. I just appreciate it. And Jason, thanks for being with us. I know Chuck's going to give you a minute to wrap up, but I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. I want to echo John's sentiments here. I'm going to get to you just a second, Jason. I want to echo his sentiments and really thank you for sitting down with us. You're one of the only Republicans in a contested primary right now, so we reached out to interview you. I do want to make sure our listeners and viewers know that we did reach out to your opponent in this primary and his handlers, and we're never really given a commitment or really even the time of day as to whether they would participate or not. So I want to echo his sentiments and thank you for sitting down with an organization that, is really out in front on some policy issues here locally. And I do want to give you, carte blanche here of a few minutes to give us some closing thoughts about the topics we discussed or anything. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in the broadcast.
Sure. Well, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't come on and talk to you all. I mean, if I can when I get through the primary, people have said, don't say when you get through the primary, you have to broaden the tent. You've got to reach out to everybody. It's the sheriff won in 2016, 54% to 46%. I looked very closely at that race because in that same election cycle, the Democratic nominee for president won Chatham County by 16 points. So I think you have to be willing to appear on programs like this. You have to be willing to go into communities and go door knocking, although we can't right now. It's frustrating, but in, over the summer, in the fall, I want to go out and talk to everybody and go to places where you haven't seen people with an R next to their name, perhaps campaign as much, at least at the county commission level. And I think that needs to happen. I think that we all can work together. I know that sounds kind of hokey, but I do strongly feel that collaboration and bringing people to the table will solve some of our problems. When I have had a disagreement with somebody, vehement political disagreements about things, I've always felt like talking to them instead of blasting one another on Facebook, actually sitting down, going play golf, going surfing, whatever, sitting down and having a cup of coffee. You can come up with reasonable compromises and come up with a good plan going forward, and you become friends with those people. I will say that I get frustrated with the Facebook stuff where people get really nasty with each other. When somebody attacks me, I text them private message, hey, give me a call. This is my cell number. Let's talk. And when we can do that, it generally helps. That's my attitude, and I'd like to bring that style of leadership to the county.
Do you want to take a moment and just tell people how they can get in touch with you on Facebook, how they can find you? I know that the campaigning is more virtual than ever these days.
Yeah, Jason Buelterman for chairman. I'm doing Facebook Live, interactive stuff. Google me, you'll find out about me. Jason Buelterman for chairman, or Buelterman. My own website is bueltermanforchairman.com. That has a lot of my platform on there. But reach out to me if you want to talk. What I've been doing is I get a list of absentee voters, right? And I literally sit there and dial those people up and call them directly and get to have that interaction with them. Some of them don't like it. 10% of them don't like getting calls from a stranger, but most people are very much willing to engage and talk. So if you want to talk to me, reach out to me on Facebook, send me an email through my website, give me your cell number. I'll follow up and I'd be glad to talk to you.
Well, thank you again, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of a holiday weekend. I know that you're going to go get some time in with the family. So again, I just want to thank you for sitting down with us. We really hope to have you back in the general election. We wish you well in your primary, upcoming on June 9th, and we'll hope to have you and the eventual Democratic Party nominee back here to answer tough questions together in the general election. So we appreciate it.
I have enjoyed it, John and Chuck. Thank you guys for doing this. I know you guys are taking time out of your weekend too. So thank you for doing that for the benefit of everybody, especially with what's going on. This is the way we're communicating with people. Sure. And I think it's wonderful. And I appreciate the invitation.
Good job, Jason.
You're welcome.
All right,
thank you, Jason. We appreciate it. And thank you, audience, for viewing. This will be available for replay and share all over Chatham County if you'd like to. I'm going to take us out. We'll see you guys on election night on June 9th live here on the Better Savannah Facebook page. Thanks so much.